Welcome everybody. I will leave the floor to Lisbeth Garis for a few minutes of introduction and then we can start.
Thank you, Roberta, and welcome everyone. We're really happy that this webinar is taking place. It's a result of a plan that we had a few years ago to try and provide more information to the membership on what you can actually do with a PhD in Silico Medicine. And we already had a career workshop earlier this year, where people explained from different perspectives what it was that they did after their PhD in Silico Medicine. But we felt that there was also a definite need for the more entrepreneurial inspired or oriented people to explain a bit more what are different ways of getting a career in Silico Medicine in industry by doing something yourself. And we're lucky enough within the ecosystem to have various examples of very small to very large initiatives that have been started by the people that are talking here. And so I'm very happy to see the range of and the diversity of the people that are here, that are talking to us today from the perspective of these different companies. I don't know, Roberta, if you want me to introduce each speaker, or is that maybe the nice thing to do? Well, I can start if somebody else takes over for the rest. So the idea is that everybody gives a presentation of about 20 minutes. I think there will be, or 10 minutes, after which there will be ample time for questions and answers. So please note your questions in the question box, then we can follow up. Don't use the chat, but the questions, and they're all nicely together. And then we can pose them at the end, and some very practical ones can already be answered directly, maybe by the speakers, if that is easy to do. And then without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker. It's Sheena Macpherson. She is an entrepreneur with over 17 years of experience with both multinational companies and startups, and specialized in regulated medical software. She is now the CEO of Adsilico, a spin-off from the university, or a spin-out of the University of Leeds, sorry. And that offers high-fidelity virtual populations that are suitable to assess safety, efficacy, and performance of medical devices within in silico trials. So, Sheena, thank you very much for being here. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Lisbeth. Much appreciated. Can I share my screen yet? So if you can let me know when you can see it, and if you can see it in full screen.
Yes, to both.
Perfect. Great, thank you. Brilliant. So as Lisbeth said, I am Sheena Macpherson, and I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of Adsilico, which is a spin-out from the University of Leeds. But by way of introduction, my background is that I am actually not an academic. I have been working with an academic team. I have come more from an industry background, specializing in software as a medical device and digital health. So I've come more from the regulatory side of generating objective evidence to support regulated software and algorithms that have been used to inform a clinical decision. But I've got involved in this team as part of our process for taking the amazing science that the academic team have created at the University of Leeds within SysTip through funding from the Royal Academy of Engineering, which is an in silico platform, which, as Lisbeth mentions, we're initially focusing on virtual populations. But the reason that I got involved is part of the first phase of this. So they create some amazing research. They've written some papers that have been published in high-profile publications such as Nature Communications. Now what do you do with it? So this is the pathway towards translational impact. So we've looked at, first of all, the assessment of what is the commercial viability of this research and what can you do with it. And we're very fortunate that at Leeds we got some internal translational funding to assess the commercial viability of the science that had been created. And we looked at a range of things within that, such as the IP assets associated with it, and we did an IP audit, we developed an IP strategy. We looked at the actual technology platform itself and looked at the maturity of it and what a roadmap would look like, and effectively a gap analysis to get to where we wanted to do. And because we're working in the medical device space, we looked at our regulatory strategy, we developed a high-level business plan, and we put together an investor strategy and pitch deck. So as part of that assessment, there came a decision point. Is there enough in what the amazing science that have been created? Is there enough business value or commercial value to actually spin this out? And the decision was that yes, there is sufficient value. So Adsilico Limited was created in July 2022 and incorporated as a company. So that's great. So the company exists, but it doesn't have any money. So the next phase is to then refine the proposition and build it into an investable proposition and go out and fundraise. So I joined as part of the assessment process as the entrepreneur in residence. And so part of the funding that the team got was to support the work that I was leading, but we also worked with a range of other different consultants as part of that process. So we then got additional funding internally to look at building the proposition, to help refine the message, to engage with investors, to look at target customers, to build an advisory board, and to validate some of our assumptions, refine our business plan, and do some risk analysis. So we're in the fortunate position that we have found investors that are interested in what we're doing and that would like to support us on our journey. So we're just going through the final due diligence process and contracting for a 3.5 million investment, which close in the coming weeks. And as part of that, there is a licensing agreement with the university. In addition, after multiple attempts, we're finally successful with an Innovate UK grant, and we've just been awarded that as well. So that's on top of the 350 million that we're raising. So that's the journey. And I thought what I'd talk about today was some of the practical things that we actually went through in terms of what we did and some of the lessons learned. So I hope this is useful to the audience, especially if you are thinking of pursuing an entrepreneurial route as part of your translational impact. So first of all, as part of the assessment of the commercial opportunity, for our spin out, what was the vision? What is it we actually wanted to do? And what are the bold steps associated with that? And then what's the mission for that? So there's a whole range of different ways you can achieve this, but there's different mechanisms. We had 5 bold steps that are associated with our creating or getting to our North Star or our vision. We then looked at the product. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the solution and what are the benefits? I mean, this may sound pretty simple, but if you've been looking at this from a scientific perspective, it may not be obvious what the industry problem is that you're solving and who you're solving it for, and what are the actual benefits, not in terms of just good science, that you're actually generating that effectively people will pay for. We then looked at what our unique proposition was, how we differentiate ourselves in the market, what our high-level concept was, and so this could be comparing to it's to help other people understand what you're doing. It's often easier to explain it in terms of high-level concepts, and what our advantage is associated with that. We then looked at the market, so who are our target customers? What customer segments are we going to look for as part of our proposition, and who are our likely early adopters? And then we know who to talk to initially. What the alternatives are out there. Now, it could be that there are no real alternatives because you're so cutting edge, but it could be that there are alternatives, but there are differences in what those guys may be offering. You need to look at what your revenue streams are, and you need to say, well, why now? Why would somebody do this now? What is the environment that means that this is possible from whether it be from a regulatory perspective. Obviously, in this case, there is huge changes around governments pushing for alternatives to animal testing. So there's a huge opportunity for in silico methods to be adopted there. There is access to resources in terms of access to compute power and storage facilities. The FDA are now accepting in silico generated evidence. So all of these different elements are sort of, you have to be able to justify sort of why now. This is what led to the assessment that led to the decision for the University of Leeds to actually give the green light to spin out. So in terms of our commercial proposition, there were several key considerations that we had to demonstrate. So the proof of relevance. So we needed to be able to demonstrate value to the people that we want to offer this to. As part of that, we needed to do a thorough customer analysis of what is the problem that they have and outline the opportunities for what it is that we're providing. Concept analysis. So what we're solving a problem, but we need to be able to explain the impact of that in real terms. So whether it will be getting to market quicker, it might be reducing costs in other areas. Ultimately, it's improving innovation for patients and getting access to it quicker. So all of these different things, you need to be able to explain it in a simplistic way that other people that are not from your world and don't have a PhD can understand. You need to look at the competitive analysis. Can the customer's problem be solved with using other tools? And in some cases it can already, and especially if you're proposing something in the in silico space, you're often promoting something that is over and above what is the norm. So therefore, it probably has an additional cost over and above what they're already doing. So there is more focus for you to demonstrate why they should be making that change and possibly that additional cost as part of that process. And looking at how your competitors are doing that problem is a really good way of analyzing who's doing what, whether your approach is better. The ecosystem analysis. So we all in this in silico space, we don't work in isolation. So there are lots of in silico enablers, whether it be the simulation companies like Ansys or Dassault or any of those guys. You have also the companies that are doing the compute resources, so AWS. You have the data providers. So there's a whole ecosystem, and you need to understand where your proposition fits and where you play and who are your initial touch points and who are sort of wider touch points within that. So we did a whole load of work around mapping the ecosystem. Now, when you're starting out, you probably don't have any historical data, and especially if you're doing something novel, it may be difficult to benchmark, but you have to do something. So you have to have some form of assumption that you can simulate and you can generate some sensible revenue forecasts that you can demonstrate. The good thing is that at an early stage spin out, it's unlikely that investors are going to hold you to this, but they do want you to have thought about it. And it is quite important that you have put some thought into that process. So in terms of looking at the technology, so you want it to be suitable and scalable and that it's fit for purpose. So in our space, this means that you need to be compliant with relevant regulatory standards. And approach to risk. Risk is something that you have to have a mature attitude towards because there's risk in everything, and your job is to document those risks and to mitigate them. You can't necessarily get rid of all of them, but you can, with a sensible approach, minimize the impact that they might have on derailing what it is you want to do. So in terms of commercialization and key enablers, these are the things that we focused on for our particular business. So we looked at IP. So we looked at the inventions that have come out of the university, freedom to operate searches. So, are we infringing anybody else's patents? Can we protect the IP that we've got? And the importance that I know that many of you are coming from university, but IP doesn't always mean patents. There are other ways of protecting your IP, such as through copyright or through trade secrets. So don't be fixated that it has to be patents, because patents are great and they probably will play a role in what you're doing, but they aren't the only way. And you need to have a proper budget and a strategy for managing IP holistically. And you need to have the training internally to look at that. So we did an IP audit, we looked at the outlook, we had a strategy, but we also have management of how we're going to implement this going forward. Then on the tech side, we had the baseline platform, looking at the current service and across the board, looking at this gap analysis of where we are and where we want to get to. We also looked at the regulatory side, the resources, and the ecosystem, of which now is the regulators play quite a key part in this. So in terms of the priorities for a team, we looked at communication as our key priority area, because I come from a very different background. I think about things in a slightly different way, as we all do, but I was working with an academic team. So it was really important, especially with different types of languages. So even at the word validation in a scientific term means something completely different to validation from an investor's perspective, or even validation from a regulatory perspective. So it's really important that you make sure that you have clarity, that when you say something, everybody understands what you mean when you say that, because it can be a big source of challenge going forward. Focus, alignment on what is the problem and you're solving and who is it for. It's really important to have this as your central vision. Otherwise, it's really easy to get distracted with other things that look exciting and interesting. But at some point, once you've done your research, your analysis, you need to focus and you need to get on with it. You need to have a plan, but your plan needs to be adaptable. But it is important to have a plan. And then you need to look at what your risks are. So capturing the risks, monitoring them, it's a really key part of what it is that is going to make you look credible in front of investors, and is likely going to be the difference between you being successful and not being successful. So I won't read through all of these, but these are some of the questions. We definitely got all of these and a whole load more. But it's all around, the investor engagement was all around building an investable proposition, but demonstrating credibility and robustness in terms of your approach. So you can't possibly know everything, but you should have at least had these conversations as a team and had some considerations around that. And the onus is on us. If we're going out and asking for investment, these are perfectly legitimate questions from investors, and you need to have an answer for them, even if it's not the full answer and it's evolving. You need to have an answer to what these questions could be. And we'd spent a lot of time going through all of these questions and coming up with what our response is, or what we knew right now, and then also mapping what we didn't know, but how we planned to find out what it was, whatever the question was. So in terms of the lessons learned, so I talked to the team about this yesterday, and the team for me is the most important part of this. Because working in a startup, whether it's a spin out or a startup, if you don't have the right people around you, and you don't have the right fit in terms of ways of working, it can make it very difficult. And what should be a really fun experience can actually be a little bit challenging. So you want to avoid that at all costs by finding the right people from the start that you can have honest and robust conversations with, because it's not always easy and there are going to be challenges along the way. Communication, as I mentioned before, this is really key, finding a way to achieve shared understanding of key topics and bringing everybody along. Don't leave somebody behind. If they've got questions, answer the questions, but there has to be a point where you can move forward, and communication is key. Validation, mapping your assumptions. So we did this a lot in the early days, and our assumptions did change once we got more information. So it's important, once new information comes in, to check whether this has affected your assumptions. So we validated with industry, we validated with regulators, and we validated with our target customers, but also in a team. Are we still doing the right thing? Now, messaging, this is one that the academics especially found quite challenging in the early days, because you're very used to talking about how brilliant your science is and the impact it has from a scientific point of view. Investors don't necessarily, it's not that they don't care about that, but that isn't their primary focus. And you have to adapt your messaging in a simple way that you can articulate the value of what it is you're doing, either to the customer or to the investor. And their metrics for measuring that are not the same as the scientific methods that you might have to include in a scientific journal. So it is very different. And if this is an area that you're unsure of, I strongly suggest that you get advice on it, because it is a different skill set, and you need to simplify the messaging so that somebody that has come from this completely cold can understand it from scratch. And the test is that they can then go and tell somebody else what you're doing and that be correct. But the onus is on you to get that messaging right. You cannot expect other people just to understand it straight away just because it's brilliant. So feedback, always get feedback. It doesn't matter if it's a no or it's you know, people don't like what you're doing. Get the feedback, find out what it is they didn't like, or whether and it could be it's just not a good fit for them. It doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong, but you need to have that feedback to understand in order to use it to improve. Because it could be that you just, the way you phrased something, it sent them off down a different rabbit hole and they just then didn't understand it. Resilience, oh my goodness. Being part of a spin out is not for the faint-hearted. You need to have a good support network from your team, but also from external people as well, because there are hard days. It is frustrating. Hopefully it's going to be rewarding, but ultimately having that support network is really key. Being able to adapt. So there are so many things you can't plan for. A change is going to happen, and you need to be able to develop a strategy to manage this. Otherwise, it could possibly become disruptive and disrail things. Learning. Oh my goodness, it's a steep learning curve, but this, you're all, you know, everybody on this call, I imagine, is here because they like the topic that they're doing, they enjoy learning. If you can do it in a positive way, this is just another aspect of translating the amazing stuff that you're working on into impact. So it's something that's just to be embraced and part of the process. Resources. So there are so many people that have done businesses before or spin outs or are working in stuff that we're not the first. We might be the first to do something very specific related to our science or our IP, but we're not the first to do everything else. Learn from others, look for resources, ask for help. There is so much out there, you just need to look for it. And we've benefited hugely from those that have gone before, especially from a business perspective. Attitude. Startups are not for everybody. If you need structure and you need somebody to tell you what to do, and you will struggle in this environment. If you can take all of the excitements and challenges and see this as an adventure, then you're going to have a great time. I'm not going to say it's not going to be hard, but it will be less of an ordeal and definitely more focus on an adventure. So an attitude is what everyone's looking for in terms of who they want to work with as part of this process. So this is our perspective. I'm more than happy to follow up with anyone after the session or answer questions in the after part, but hopefully that's just given you a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of this was our experience, and our journey has only just begun. So hopefully the next round will give you a different perspective, because we'll be further along in our journey and we'll have actually started. So thank you very much everyone for listening.
Thank you, Sheena, for your inspiring presentation. If there are questions, I invite everybody to type them in the chat box, and then in the end of the session, we will reply to everybody. So let's move to the second presentation by Matthieu de Beule, which is the co-founder and CEO of FEops, which is a digital health leader in personalized predictive planning for structural heart interventions. So Matthieu, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you for the introduction. So it's nice to be here today. It's nice to give the lecture after Sheena. So we were where Sheena is some time ago, and let's say we've taken the step from actually then incorporating a spin-off company, and then bringing it to let's say regulatory cleared technology in both European and US markets. And we're on the verge of commercialization as we speak. So I will, in this lecture, just give an overview of, let's say, the trajectory FEops has done. I will need to go after my lecture, so if there are any questions, feel free to send them by email, and I will try to reply. But I have some urgent stuff that I need to sort out, so I apologize for that. So where are we in 2023? So I'm, as I said, Matthieu, one of the co-founders. I have a background in biomedical engineering from Ghent University, and we spun out a company from Ghent already in 2009, so some time ago. Now, we are focusing with the company on minimally invasive technologies for structural heart interventions, which are therapies related to the heart valves and the left atrial appendage. And that's what you see here on the screen. In that left atrial appendage, which is an appendage connected to the left atrium, there can be blood clot formation. And if they are getting washed out, they can cause stroke. One of the ways to avoid that stroke is to put a plug at the ostium of that device, which is an occluder. Which of course is very good if it seals well. Now, the challenge of putting these devices minimally invasively is that a physician needs to rely on medical imaging alone in order to make a correct assessment of what the ideal implant size would be. So what they do is they take a CT scan of the patient, they do some measurements as indicated on the right below, and based on these measurements, they look at a sizing chart of the manufacturer. In this case, this is the sizing chart from the Amulet device from Abbott. As you can see, this is available in 8 different sizes, and depending on the diameter or the dimensions that you measure, you need to make a choice here. But typically, depending on where you measure and who is doing the measurement, you get different values. And if you get different values, you also get different possible treatment scenarios. So typically a physician could use, based on the measurements, 2 or 3 devices. If you look to traditional preoperative planning, this is, as I said, measuring on the anatomy, plus sometimes doing an overlay of an undeformed or of a symmetrically compressed device on the preoperative CT scan. But as you can see, this doesn't learn you a lot in terms of how this device interacts with the anatomy, because as you can see here on the left, this device is just coming out of the anatomy. Now, what we have developed is a digital twin-based approach where we take routine medical images, we transform these in a computer model of the patient, we have computer models of the devices, and then in detail, we can predict how the device will sit, how it will be compressed, and how both the device and the anatomy deform. Now, if you compare that with the picture on the left, you already start to get more insights, because this is actually how a device will sit, and based on this information, the physician can really select the right device for the right patient. Now, this is also shown here conceptually. So from a routine medical images, we do a 2D reconstruction of the anatomy, and then we can mimic actual procedures, and you will see some examples on aortic valve implantation as shown here. So we really mimic the deployment of the device. We push the all diseased valves to the side, and then we look how the device is sitting. But also on the LAA side, that is occlusion, there we can then model different device sizes in different positions, and based on that information, the physician can make a selection. But we do the similar things for mitral valve replacement, tricuspid valve replacement, and pulmonary valve replacement. Now, if you look at FEops is today, in a nutshell, we've raised some money both from venture capital as non-dilutive, so from grants. We have surrounded us by some industry veterans in our board of directors. We have also done clinical trials to show the impact of our technology. I currently have a team of about 40 people located in Belgium, technology protected with some patent families, and technology has been used in over 8,000 patients all over the world. Now, one important aspect if you develop medical technology is evidence, because let's say from day one, a lot of physicians will find your idea novel and cool, and highly likely will be happy to support you in your development process. But if you then really want to make sure that there is significant adoption of this technology, and also you envision a commercial trajectory, then you will need evidence. And the most convincing clinical evidence is to do a randomized clinical trial. Means that you have 2 arms, one arm where you use classic planning technology in our case, and one arm where they use our technology. And what we've seen in the clinical trial is that on average, physicians use 1.2 devices per patient in the classic arm. So they try a device, if it doesn't work, they take it out and put a new one in. With our technology, this went down to 1.03, which is very close to 1. And based on that, we've seen a significant impact both on efficiency and outcomes. So procedures are faster, they're safer, you get a better outcome of these patients, and there are less chances of complications. Now, as I mentioned before, we started 2009, so be as patient as you can be, developing novel medical technology and really bringing it from the concept up until commercialization and beyond is typically a long journey. Founded in 2009. Some advice: if possible, don't try it alone. As mentioned by Sheena, make sure you surround yourself with a good team that you can count on. Make sure in that team you have complementary skills. So don't try to find twins of yourself. Make sure people have their own skill set. And also make sure you know each other well. Peter, the guy standing left from me, he's the co-founder of the company, and we're still there. He's as the CTO and the CEO, and we're, let's say, navigating the ship as good as possible through the storms that we're facing. Now, starting a company after your PhD, in all honesty, is challenging for a couple of reasons. One is you, of course, lack experience. You have some academic experience, and you might have read something or have done some courses. So be aware that highly likely you will make mistakes. We have done that. If you look to the current version of our technology, the code base is completely different than it was when we started developing it. And by making these mistakes, you might lose time. Now, why is it a good idea to start a company after your PhD? One, it's highly likely a relatively easy moment in your life to take some risk. You don't have probably too many kids running around, not too many mortgages to pay off. And very importantly, like everything in life, you learn by doing. And I said, if you surround yourself by skilled people, you can learn very fast. Now, why do we think it worked for FEops? We had already existing customers, so we knew that what we were doing was relevant for industry, and they were willing to pay for it because we were doing some consultancy assignments during our PhDs with contracts with university. We started as a consulting company, which of course is pretty low risk because you only need brains, a computer, and some software. We got very good support from the university, so make sure you have a very open dialogue with them, and also some support from government. Like also mentioned in the previous talk, there are grants that can help you initially. Now, then we transformed from a consulting company to a technology company. Why? On the one side, because consulting, when we were really rendering services on how to model devices and help medical device companies improve their products, it's difficult to scale, in all honesty, because people come only with very complex problems to you. And you will have an impact on device development, but these are devices that might reach the market 10, 15 years from now, so you don't really sense or feel the immediate impact of your work. That's why if you start building your own medical technology, you see that impact much faster. So 2009, we founded FEops. 2012, the idea of combining device modeling with patient images and using that for preoperative planning emerged. We had a proof of concept in 2013 that did a Series A of 1.3 million in 2014, raised another 6 million in Series B in 2017. It's, however, challenging if you want to transition from a consulting company to a technology company, because we kept doing these consulting assignments and they tend to keep having priority because you're working for an external customer which is paying you, so you don't want to let him down. So sometimes you take the risk that you might delay your own product development, which in the end might be more valuable to develop than just these consulting services. Plus also, if you start to raise money, be aware that you will also you lose full control because you will get a board of directors that is also helping you to guide the ship. Now, raising money, I'm glad to hear that the previous speaker was able to do that, because it's a tough economical climate, definitely for companies that are just starting at this point in time. So know that it takes a lot of time and energy. Like with everything, just try to have multiple options. Don't focus on the valuation alone, because you will get money in return of shares for your company, and the share price, of course, will determine how many shares you have to give away for that amount of money. But keep in mind that there are a lot of other factors that play a role, that if at one moment in time you would exit your company, the value that you will keep having as a founder. And in terms of money, don't be naive. You will highly likely need more than you think. Good news is that there is a lot of money. You just need to make sure that you talk to the right investors at the right moment in time with the right story. Now, what's also important is that once you're in your company, you're running, you think you have an exciting idea, you start developing it, you have first positive feedback from the market, but at one moment in time, you might start feeling signals that it's becoming complex. And then on the one side, you need to make sure you're persistent, just to make sure you push it as far you should push it to convince people, but also don't be stubborn. If the signals are getting more and more reinforced, you might need to change your strategy, which is not an easy thing to do. But it's important because if you don't do it, you might just crash against a wall. Now, FEops has done that already a couple of times. First pivot we did is initially our business model was to bring this technology directly ourselves to market. So we thought, okay, listen, we had a lot of people interested, so we developed it. So we said, okay, for it's regulatory cleared, it will probably sell itself because everybody's really interested to get engaged. That discussion changes when you start talking about finances and are people willing to pay for it. Then it might become more challenging, and that's why we, let's say, then changed from a path that the hospitals would pay for the technology to a path where device manufacturers would pay because they also gain from a better preoperative planning. On the other hand, what we've also learned is with the clinical evidence that we gathered in the meantime, but we did a randomized clinical trial that took us 2-3 years. With that clinical evidence, you can also start building a case towards a hospital to convince them to invest in it because they also gain time and this can earn money with the time that was gained. Now, keep in mind that running such a company is a marathon, not a sprint. So the path towards the finish is not always clear. As I said, sometimes you have to change direction. It's also, yeah, there are ups and downs. There are very, very exciting moments, but there are also moments that things are a bit tougher because of a lot of reasons. So try to hang in there. What you do is not always visible. It's the same like if you develop a product, the first 70–80%, you really see a lot of progress. Then you might need to start documenting things for regulatory purposes, and this is always that visible. Would I do it again? Yes. And if you have any questions, as said, please just maybe summarize them by email, and I will try to address them later on. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Matthieu. As with the previous speaker, if there are questions, please put them in the chat, and then we will also make sure that they get sent to Matthieu if you can send them yourself. So that with that, I would like to pass on to the next speaker, who is from not a spin-off but a larger company. It's Christine Meuri, and she well, she is replacing Philippe Favre, who was announced as the speaker for this session. She is a research manager for the computational biomechanics unit at Zimmer, that she joined after 2 years in Ortho Plus, after coming right out of the master program of ETH Zurich. So Christine, thank you very much for being here. Screen's yours.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot. I hope you see my screen.
Yes, we do.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, thanks a lot also to the previous speakers. It's very interesting to see that entrepreneurship coming out of the university. So this is kind of now a little bit different. So not everybody is probably the right person to do a spin-off or do as its own business. So that's also kind of another career type that you can pursue. It's kind of a corporate position. So as I was already mentioned, I'm working as a manager in computational biomechanics in corporate R&D. So we are a larger orthopedics company. So Zimmer Biomet is one of the leading orthopedics company in the world. It should move on if it does. Yeah, and this is kind of we have a huge portfolio, and it's a large company with many, with 7,000 employees all over the world. And we do a lot of different products, from artificial joint replacements in all kind of joints in the body, but we also have a huge portfolio of services, be it from robotics or patient care systems and predictive analytics, where we have a lot of PhD students coming and joining our groups in different departments, and having kind of a corporate position. So for my side, I'm working in corporate R&D and in the preclinical testing side. So whenever we want to bring a product to the market, we have to prove it first before we actually put it into a patient that the product is safe and effective. So there is a lot going on, from designing to testing and verifying it that we have a good product. But then also after that, once we have launched a product, there are a lot of studies going on for clinical follow-up and post-market surveillance. And we supported with our group the preclinical testing, but also the post-market surveillance with a lot of computational modeling. So when I go for the preclinical testing, what kind of modeling are we using for that portion of it? So we are supporting it for the user needs. So whenever we have an idea for a product, we have to come up with ideas. What are the inputs? What are the requirements? What do the new products have to serve? What is the patient they need to serve? What kind of requirements do they have from a joint loading and other perspective? And then we also help the developers and CAD designers come up with a good design. And we use computational modeling for the optimization of those designs and products or also services. But then the huge portion of it is really the testing and verification. Really to ensure that the product does what it's supposed to do, and it's really verifying that we've done our job in the right way. And then on the other side, we also support it on the marketing side. We want to also show what work has gone into the product, why we think it's better, and why we think it's a good product, why it's safe. And we often also create a marketing support material. So as I said, the biggest thing that we do is we have to ensure that we have a safe product. And from a modeling side, what are we looking at? What is a typical risk that we investigate when it comes to joint replacement? So on the clinical side, we have different failure scenarios, such as aseptic loosening. The implant could fracture. It could actually also subside. We have bone adaptation to the implant. We have bone fracture that could happen, etc. This is all things or risks that we typically track in a clinical study once the design has been released and is put on the market, and we follow it up. But before we do it also in silico, so we can assess by modeling similar risks that we also track in the clinics. As an example, for aseptic loosening, we can test for micromotion or interface strain just to estimate how our implant will behave in the bone. And also another example is implant fracture. We have to ensure that our implants are strong enough to withstand the physiological loading. And in the modeling, we look at the stresses in the implant to ensure that those are really below the fatigue strength of the material. And this is just an example that I bring up here. So for what we do from a modeling side for implant fracture. So typically we do a so-called worst case identification. When you look at that portfolio, this is just a single example of a new shoulder system. So we have various different stem designs. We have different componentries that can be assembled to it, used in an anatomic or a reverse shoulder. And then we also have some on the other side of the joint, we have other components. So that, if we would want to test all of those, we would have to test for a year or more in the lab, just to use all those combinations and identify, or to ensure that all those are safe. But obviously we use computational modeling and finite element simulation to look at all those different combinations and identify which one is actually the worst case, which one is the weakest component in all of those different combinations. And once those are that component combination, or maybe there are 2 or 3 combinations, we take those and then we bring it to the lab. And there we start with the physical testing to ensure, yes, this is safe enough. This will not fracture when it's put into the patient. And so that is really the main issue we're trying to solve with modeling, to reduce the amount of physical tests that take much longer than an actual simulation. Another use case for modeling is for support a new design. So this is an example of a tibia paste plate in the knee, where modeling has been used to generate the new design. So we used it for design inputs, where in this example, we looked at the shape of the tibia and looked at the cross section to identify the most appropriate shape of the tibia that provides the most coverage on the tibia. And the same, we use the similar modeling not only to generate those design inputs, but also to verify it. Yes, that we have a good fit of that design. We are having actually solved an issue and will address a clinical need. And in that example, we also use a similar analysis type to support our marketing, to say, okay, here, look, we have now an improved coverage. With that, we would we will hopefully reduce the micromotion and subsidence of the implant in the clinics. But then also using other technology for the entire development process, we have a database of lots of bone models from different anatomy types. And obviously, we also have all the CAD models of the implants, and we bring those together and look at it, bring it onto the bone model itself, look how does it fit it, where does it will be placed, does it look okay, can we actually optimize it, what is the distance, and how do we design an even better implant that is more conforming to the anatomy of the bone. So this is one of a typical use case where you use modeling as well. But then that is more kind of going into in silico clinical trials. This is really an emerging technology also for the orthopedic side. It hasn't been used that much, but we have spent quite some time now in the last couple of years to go after the clinical follow-up. So really using modeling for in silico clinical trials. So once after all the preclinical testing has been performed, look and try to simulate how the actual implant will perform in a patient population. So the technical approach is probably pretty common to a lot of mechanical or biomedical students, where we have a CT scans of the bone. We would segment it, bring in our implants, do a virtual surgery there, create a finite element model, apply the material property based on the density of the bone, bring in some loading, and then solve it for whatever risk we want to analyze. Obviously, the computer model gives a lot of new opportunities where we can bring in a lot of variabilities, be it from patient anatomy, bone density variation, but also we can vary in, the loading and see how the loading affects the performance of the device over the entire population. And obviously the surgical variability, this is something we can easily do in virtual models. We can vary the component combinations, we can vary the size, the alignment, etc. Whereas in a real clinical trial, we cannot really do that because it's just one patient gets one implant and in one combination. But that modeling aspect enables us to really look at all those variations. One approach we can do is we can do it on a specific patient. So this will then become a personalized medicine, a so-called digital patient twin. Another approach is not looking specific on a patient base, but more on a virtual patient population, where we don't look at a single patient, but really look at all the variability that are likely to occur in a clinical trial to really get a prediction of the overall behavior of the implant in a population. And this is really what we refer to as in silico clinical trials, where we look at the entire population and not only at the patient-specific model. So yeah, that is kind of a short talk, what we are doing here in a corporate position. As I mentioned early on, it's not everybody is as courageous as others. I wouldn't be probably to create my own business. I really enjoy what I'm doing on a technical perspective. So it's probably also others are there like me that are really enjoying that technical work. So I also want to give a perspective, how did I get there? Why, how does it come that, what kind of people are we looking in a corporate R&D position? So yeah, it looks sometimes that it's a really straight path to the top of the mountain, how you get there. A lot of our colleagues or my colleagues, they have kind of a typical career path, as I would say it, name it. Most of them started with a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering or related research or related topics, sorry. Some of us, they do have a PhD, but it's not a strict requirement. It's a really nice addition. And then, some made a little detour, but often we have really PhD coming from the university after a postdoc or without and starting a corporate R&D position. But yeah, there are also alternative career paths. Often you start somewhere in the valley and you have different choices. So for example, I did an undergrad student in environmental science. oops, wrong direction. And then a master in human movement sports science. And as mentioned before, after that, I was really kind of like thinking, what shall I do? Shall I do a PhD? Should I go forward with a corporate position? And often some roads are blocked, some are opened, and you just choose whatever looks the most attractive at that time, what opportunities you have. As mentioned before, I did work in clinical affairs, working on the clinical side, which is also very interesting to see the actual usage of those products. But often in life, some things change, and I was at a position where I had to decide what I wanted to do next. And I remembered my mentor from like my master's thesis, and yeah, I decided to go back and come back to this corporate position in R&D with all the knowledge that I've gained over the year, and made a little detour, and now that's where I am, and I'm climbing this mountain on really the technical SME rules. And this is really something that I want to also provide as an insight. It's yeah, it's not always a straight career path, and you have always a choice. There are different ways, and you can choose and which road to take, and it often depends who you meet and what the decisions are at a certain moment, and what the opportunities are, and take those if you meet them and have them. So that's kind of my advice as well for anybody that looks for a new position in life or a new work in life. Yeah, with that, I thank you as well. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Thank you, Christine, for your suggestions and your very interesting presentation. Again, for the question, I would suggest everybody to put them in the question box. And now let's move to the next speaker, which is François Boissel. He is the co-founder and CEO of Nova. And yeah, François, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Are you guys seeing my slide deck?
I cannot see them.
No, we're not.
Hang on. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, so hang on. All right, so I'll keep it brief, 10 minutes, and mostly focusing on some of the key learnings along a fairly long entrepreneurial journey. The company was started close to 14 years ago, so hopefully I'll have quite a number of insights to share for these fledgling entrepreneurs in the audience. So starting with Nova's mission, which really was from the outset, but had twists and turns along the 14-year journey, which is essentially to democratize the use of QSP models and clinical trial simulation within pharma companies. So we're not in the medical devices space, we're solely focused on drug research and development. And our platform, Ginkgo, really is built around this premise that for this technology to become as pervasive as possible throughout the entire industry, you need to bring to the market a product that makes using those complex QSP models as simple as possible, especially for non-QSP subject matter experts, which are de facto the end users of those predictive capabilities, sitting in the clinical development side, for instance. Very briefly, something that we're super proud about and very excited actually for the QSP space as a whole. We've published over the past couple of months 2 successful prospective predictions of the outcome of 2 different trials for lung cancer without having had access to any patient-level confidential data from neither sponsors, AstraZeneca for the first one and Janssen for the second one, and our predictions came very close to what was eventually later published by both pharma companies. So the reason why I'm sharing this is not to boast But if you were to launch a financing round and start discussions with investors, one of the key questions you will get very early in the process is, how do we know the technology works? So please feel free to use these examples that QSP models can indeed predict clinical outcomes with virtual patients. All right, so I'll step directly into some of the key learnings from this close to 14 years entrepreneurial journey. First of all, one thing that is very important is to have in mind that the mission that you have when you start the company really will inform some of the most critical decisions about the business along the way, and especially the business model. So basically, what we're seeing in our space and in the larger space of, let's say, if we include AI-driven drug discovery companies, very different business models, essentially 3 different ones. You have tech-enabled services or consulting companies, which right now form the majority of the QSP players out there. You have product-oriented business models, so subscription to a platform and pre-built content, which is the direction that Nova has decided to take. And for AI drug discovery platforms, most of these businesses try to enter into potentially large collaboration agreements on very specific drug programs with pharma sponsors. Usually with upfront payments, and then later down the road, milestone-related payments. So these are very different in terms of business models and directions for the overall company. Our decision from the outset really was to help drive the widespread adoption of in silico technologies throughout the pharma industry, and that's the reason why we went for, well, initially the consulting business model, and after we were able to raise, because consulting is not easy to scale, as one of the other CEOs mentioned before my presentation, essentially using this venture financing round to transition the company towards a more scalable platform business model, so that hopefully over time, a lot of ecosystem participants end up using the solution. But we did have, during this fundraising process back in 2019, a conversation with a high street tech investor from the Silicon Valley, who's basically telling us the following thing. Well, listen, if you do have, sort of superior predictability with your technology, so essentially an advantage over other companies in the sort of larger biotech space, why don't we fund you and you just focus your tech and your platform on 3 or 4 different drug programs. This was absolutely not what the company's mission was from the outset. That would have meant that we had to keep the technology confidential, keep it to ourselves, and just potentially support 3 or 4 different drug programs, whereas we want our Ginkgo platform to be used pretty much everywhere throughout the large pharma pipelines. The other consequence that this will have, the business model and the mission, it will be felt on the trajectory of the company. Is it going to be high-scale super growth, or will you be focusing on profitability? The reality is that you can't have both, and you need to make a choice. And contrary to what someone's mentioned before, there's not that much money out there right now. As you know, we're going through tough economic times, and there's been a seismic shift in the venture capital landscape, whereas before the start of the crisis, venture funds were super happy to finance growth at the expense of demonstrating that your business model is profitable. In other words, let's capture market share, and then we'll see later as far as profitability is concerned. Now the tide has entirely reversed, and the focus is on actually demonstrating that you can build a profitable business with a less aggressive growth trajectory in terms of sales. So you really need to think carefully about these. Sorry. Okay. Timing is everything. You can have the best management team, the best IP protection, a lot of venture financing available, so a lot of financial resources. if the timing is not right, you will go absolutely nowhere. There's this famous aphorism from Victor Hugo, a French author, saying nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And that really is the first question that an investor will ask himself or herself when looking at your dossier. Is the technology really in a market that is calling for the solution they are offering, or am I looking at a problem searching for a solution? A solution searching for a problem. So from that standpoint, you really need to make sure that there's at least early indications of product market fit. In other words, that potential customers start to realize that they need to have your solution. And therefore listen carefully to their pain points to make sure that you really evaluate this product market fit correctly. Cherish your early adopters. You may know the law of diffusion of innovation, which essentially resembles a normal distribution where the tail end of the curve corresponds to the early adopters, those less risk-averse customers that will help you generate your first proof of concepts. Really make sure that you cherish these customers, as they will help you scale your business afterwards. As you produce those proof of concepts with them, you will then, and they will then help you convince the more risk-averse investors that you find in the mainstream of this law of diffusion of innovation curve. One of the questions we have really often, as you can imagine, is there a proper validation framework so that we can evaluate the robustness of the models and therefore the robustness of your predictive insights? So I guess from the timing, which was bullet point number 2, and the acceptability from health authorities, we are today obviously in a much better position than in 2010 when we started the company. So hopefully for you guys, for future startups that you would build around the in silico trial simulation space, you would have less of a hard time than we had back in the days to establish the acceptability and essentially reassure both investors and customers that the entire space was going somewhere. You will also need to get your storytelling straight versus AI, pure AI approaches. Whatever is the position, what we have here at Nova is actually a hybrid approach between mechanistic QSP models and AI algorithms. But AI is really light in our entire framework. So some of your informed buyers, assuming you will be addressing the QSP teams within large pharma companies, will know the difference between the various approaches out there, data intensive versus knowledge intensive for mechanistic models. But they may depend, or they will actually depend more often than not, on key stakeholders that hold budgets that may not be as sophisticated as the QSP customer you're discussing with. So you will need to have a nice storytelling to present the differences without being obviously negative towards AI approaches. I'd rather see them as complementary, but you certainly need to have something ready for that. Something that has also proven extremely helpful as we scaled the company. We're now more than 50 plus researchers and software developers. And by the way, hiring mistakes are extremely costly. So you really need to prepare for a potential scale in your headcount. Really is to think carefully amongst your co-founders about the values that you want to promote within the company. And these values will actually prove extremely helpful because you will be able to turn with a well understood set of values within your team to turn all your team members into a potential recruiter. So at Nova, the interview process, usually everyone participates. Not everyone 50 plus for one single candidate, of course, but everyone, even junior profiles, is given the opportunity to partake into interviews. And evaluating hard skills is the easy part, whereas assessing soft skills and therefore minimizing the risk of a misfit is quite hard in practice, because you'll always have a limited number of interactions with potential future employees, let's say 3 interviews, that's the case at Nova. It may well not be enough to detect issues from a soft skill standpoint. So make sure that you have a clearly articulated set of values and that all your employees really understand your company's DNA, so they can actually be good at spotting the right soft skills that your company will be looking for. Don't fool yourself. Selling to pharma is incredibly lengthy and difficult. So there's no easy go-to-market, but from an investor standpoint, if we look at the top questions that an investor will ask, so obviously there's the size of the market opportunity, there's the timing, which was the point I was making on the previous slide, but there's also certainly your go-to-market. They know if they're sophisticated in terms of pharma industry expertise, they will know that selling cycles are extremely long, that essentially exposes the company to cash flow issues if you have not been conservative enough in building your financial projections. So be very wary about this particular topic and think carefully and test how you want to optimize your go-to-market. Who are the ideal customer profiles, ICPs, ideal customer profiles within a large pharma company? What is the budget appropriation process? Who essentially holds the decision-making power, etc., etc. And last, think carefully about how you want to build your business, because this will have dramatic consequences down the line. In other words, the choice between bootstrapping your company or, because you need to invest and accelerate, rely on venture financing. These are 2 very different trajectories. Bootstrapping can be a great option, almost always available unless you need significant upfront investment in research and development, in which case even research grants might not be sufficient. So you'll need to rely on outside sources of financing, and typically venture. But if you just bootstrap your company through revenues, you can build great success stories and have great exits down the line. Whereas raising from VCs, yes, you will accelerate, essentially put the foot on the pedal, so get faster to market and have your R&D being completed in, let's say, 2 or 3 years as opposed to a longer time horizon. So that's all good and great, but this comes with implications in terms, for instance, of governance. So having to report to a board of directors where most of the strategic decisions need to be taken collectively, which is, if you have an issue with the feeling that you're not your boss anymore, then don't go for venture financing. The reality is that with good investors on your board, a board of directors can be extremely helpful, really to sort of help you take you out of the day-to-day operations and think strategically about how you want to build the business over the next couple of years. And it also has personal implications in terms of dilution, etc., etc. And I think that's it. Yep.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Francois, for that presentation on Nova. Just a reminder for everyone to submit questions in the chat if they have any. And on to our final speaker, we have Luca Midi, who is the founder and CEO of In Silico Trials, which is a platform facilitating the use of modeling and simulation in healthcare. He has previously been the CEO of a cybersecurity firm and also currently coordinates research collaboration between the company In Silico Trials and the FDA. So Luca, the floor is yours.
Luca, sorry, I think you are muted.
Here. Okay. Oh, sorry for that. Sharing my slides. Please let me know where you can see it.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with very interested folks on what could be possible in terms of entrepreneurial activity and business activity in the modeling simulation. And I'm very happy I had the chance to present what we're doing after that you heard so very important experience from relevant companies, a startup or already established company. And let me say, differently from what being presented, I'm going to tell you a different story, a way that we are working with researchers, with PhD, with people developing models in a different perspective. So as In Silico Trust, we are working to revolutionize the way that drug and devices are developed using the so-called In Silico technology. And this is something that we started some years ago, and now I'm very happy that there are many companies working in this direction because the benefit is really relevant. We know that the problem in this market are huge. To create a new product require 2.6 billion, 12 years, and just 5% of the compounder in phase 1 will become a product for the market. So basically, this is creating a huge problem in terms of ROI, because now that the drugs are targeting a huge number of patients, if you keep the structure of the R&D as it was in the past, then the return on the investment will be very limited and sometimes will not cover the expenses done for the creation of a new product. So there was a need to change this ecosystem, not only using simulation, but using simulation in a very effective way. So what we started to do some years ago is to create a platform, the In Silico Trust platform, that basically was considering the fact that there are dozens, let's say now we have more than 70 scientific partners around the world that were developing the science, they were developing the algorithm, they were developing the different kind of model, PBPK, PKPD, QSP, and many others, or also in the medical device, CFD, structural models, that was not able to be used by customers in a business way. Nowadays, the market for the digital tool is composed by technology like Netflix for digital videos, for Spotify for music, App Store for application. So we decided to create in the cloud a similar approach to give the opportunity to dozens and dozens of researchers to work with us, and with us work with customers, basically being able to provide the science they were developing and interacting with the customer on the scientific aspect while we were taking care of the commercialization, the product creation, starting from the pure science algorithm, and basically to leverage the approach that now, as I said, is normal in other industries. Here is just a snapshot of the scientific partners we have. As I said, more than 70s, and many of these are working with us with Horizon 2020 or Horizon project. Now we are in more than 7 Horizon 2020 Horizon projects, as the In Silico Trust platform is seen as a great way to disseminate and sometimes commercialize the algorithm developed through the R&D process financed by European Union. We are applying this algorithm at different stage of the development, from say early development, or I would say discovery, where we got on target identification, lead optimization, or drug repurposing, up to working the real-world evidence, real-world data application, going through synthetic control arm, applying also the CMC, so simulation of production, where we work with very important partners that's already working with regulators like the FDA, or optimization of trial design and site. And here we are working with partners to generate incredible value for final customers. Here there are 2 examples of customers we have worked in the recent month. One is Merck, where we work with algorithm provided by one of our partners to execute simulation of multiple sclerosis, and we've been able to reduce from 4 years, that will be the traditional trial, to 1 day of simulation. And the second example is with a Japanese pharma company called Eisai. We've been able, using model from partners to provide results in terms of cardiac safety of a small molecule in 1 minute instead of 3 days. I will use some time on this example of ASI, because here we are not just leveraging this algorithm and model coming from the partners, but we are combining models algorithm coming from different partners. So the cardiac suite we have created is composed by 3 models. One, QT-TTP risk screen evaluating a clinical aspect of the cardiac safety provided by University of Valencia. Second one, Stripes, provided by University of Tampere in Finland with University of Bologna, Italy. And the third one provided by the FDA called SIPA In Silico. So combining 3 models at the same time from 3 different providers is creating an incredible value for the final customer, because of course we are able to increase the accuracy, the sensitivity, and so the final outcome is better, because the user of this model don't have to rely on just our science, but is leveraging science from very great researchers combined at the same time to generate the results that at the end of the day are very, very relevant from the credibility and the validation point of view. Also because, for example, in this case, there is a model coming directly from a regulator. This process of model acquisition gives the opportunity, as I said, to partner to work with final customers, so to people that are small companies that are not able to commercialize their own tools worldwide, or to PhD researchers or to professors in university. Of course, this need to create products that are very valuable from a scientific point of view. So we are applying a model acquisition framework that has some acquisition criteria that evaluate the value of the model from a scientific point of view, because what we are building in Silico Trust is a trusted environment for all the stakeholders. As I said, dozens and dozens of researchers on one side and company on the others, and we want to keep this value, scientific value, very high. So we have this pathway for the definition of the collaboration with scientific partners. So starting, of course, from NDA signing, then we go through an administrative workflow, and we go through a technical workflow. These are steps that normally a company, we have seen some example before, need to do on their own, but there is a need of investment, financing, and expertise. And this is a combination of our expertise, our funding, our presence on the market, with the scientific expertise of the researcher. So here there is a way to make business on the market without the need to do everything on your own and leveraging an existing activity. Like for every e-commerce company now, it's very common, it's very useful to work with Amazon to be able to leverage these platform capabilities, logistic capabilities to deliver their own products to the customers. And we are creating the same in the modeling and simulation ecosystem. I have to say that this has been really appreciated by a lot of people. As I said, we are receiving a lot of requests from researchers, developers, and also small and medium-sized company in the modeling simulation to integrate their own model in our platform. And at the same time, working in the European research ecosystem, we have been awarded by many elements by European Union, and the recent one been in 3 weeks ago in Lisbon, where there was this European Commission event called Innovation Radar Prize, and we've been awarded as the best company in Europe for AI and smart devices. And of course, this is a strong recognition by European Commission that went to the Silico Trust platform, but especially to the researcher and to the partner that we have that is basically creating this new way to take the academic research centers and company science towards the market with the target to revolutionize the way that R&D is done and to democratize access to modeling and simulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca. That was a really interesting presentation. I like the platform. So now we've got our discussion section, so we'll try and keep this quick, so if people can keep their answers to a minimum. I'll just read out some questions that have already been answered, just as to start to get the ball rolling. So a question from Thomas. He asked a question to all presenters who identify themselves as spin off or spin out. Does or did in the past the university have equity in your startup? And Sheena replied and said, for Adsilico, the University of Leeds will take a percentage that's diluted. And then our second question that is here that's been answered is from Beule, who thanks everyone for their presentations and said, when beginning a startup or a spin-off, how mature does the technology need to be? So Sheena also answered this one, saying that from her experience that it may not matter how mature the technology is if it doesn't solve a real problem, and it's more about that maturity doesn't automatically mean success, and investors invest in a wide range of innovations, but your job is to provide the evidence that your proposition is an investable proposition. So maybe if we could ask any other startup, any other people who've done the startup this question. So how mature does the technology need to be? So maybe Francois or Luca. Anyone? So, okay, we can go on to the next question. So, question to all presenters. Imagine I have an idea and I want to start a company. What is the best person to talk to first? Is there any way to protect my idea while I share it with others, to find a team or investors? And that's from Mushtaba. So does anyone want to answer that?
Well, I could give it a shot from the university perspective. So it does depend on if the person is in a university, because if you are developing science within a university, there is a likelihood that the university actually has some ownership over that IP. So you may want to talk to your commercialization team or tech transfer office to start with, and they will be able to give you some advice. If you're doing it outside, there are lots of different resources that you can go to from Techstars, or there's just a whole range if you've got an idea and you want to protect it. But I think the reality is that just having the idea is probably not going to be sufficient for somebody to steal it. So it is okay to have conversations, but obviously don't give away all the methodology and the, exactly how you're going to do things. But if you want to just go and get some general advice and you're in a university, from a spin out perspective, I would go to your tech transfer office.
Okay, thank you, Sheena. So moving on, a question to Luca from Thomas, a quite direct question. So he's saying that we do develop models and publish them as open source with MIT license, and is it still interesting to potentially become your partner?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have many partners that have this kind of approach. Company, and I make the example of Red Hat. So Red Hat was working on Linux, making out of Linux, it was open source, something that the company could use because it was supported, because it was structured in a way that they could use, despite the fact that there was another open source version. So very happy to work with people developing open source model, because what we want to do is to put on top on the science some technical element that will make this product become more interesting for some of the company in the market. I won't say all, but some of the company on the market. So yeah, happy, Thomas, please come back to me and we can discuss whenever you want.
Nice. And then maybe a question for Christine. So what are the best qualities that you look for in PhD students within big corporations? The problem is,
I mean, often the open attitude and really the willingness to learn something, and they just see that you can do different things. I mean, it's hard to say. It's often, as others have mentioned it's the personality, it's the soft skill, whether that person fits into the team, and not a particular skill sets. I mean, we all assume that people know their tools, they know how to do computational modeling, and then it's often how can they present themselves, how do they fit in a team, do they bring an additional experience or additional skill sets that we are missing in the team. I mean, it's yeah, I think there's similar things that have already been mentioned by others when you start recruiting.
Thank you. And then one final question from Omar. So this is for Luca. How do In Silico trial evaluate the models to be acquired in their platform, and do they have a preference for a specific type of models, such as physiological over data-driven, etc.?
No, we are open to every kind of model, so physiological, mechanistic, QSP, etc., because we want that the richness of our platform is thanks to the partner that are working with us. So all the valuable model is fine. Then let's define valuable. Valuable is something that is very good from a scientific point of view. And many times to evaluate that, we make some validation activities. We look at the publication. We also rely on the knowledge of the model developer. And for some model, we do the acceleration program, where if the model is not yet ready for the market, we work with the developer to make something together on some research activity we have going on to create experiences and then to create feedback on this model, also using synthetic data that we have available to generate another version that could become ready for the market and to be integrated in the platform.
Thank you very much, Luca. And with this, I would like to thank all the speakers, obviously, for sharing their valuable insights with all of us. But I would also like to thank Anna and Ben from the student committee for introducing the speakers and leading the Q&A. So thank you all for being here. If you have any suggestions for other activities that might be of interest for you, just let us know. You know where to find us at the VPH Institute, and we'd be happy to discuss that. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day.